Hi, welcome to City at a Glance. My name is David Young, and here we talk about issues that are important to Fort Collins. With us, as always, is our city manager, Darren Atterbury. Darren, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, David.
Today we'll be discussing a very exciting topic, the budget. And with us, we have Mike Beckstead, our Chief Financial Officer. Mike, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, David.
And Lawrence Pollock. Lawrence is our Budget and Performance Measurement Manager. Lawrence, thank you for joining us. That's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful.
And before we get into the topic today, I just wanted to give everybody a bit of incentive to stick around. At the end of today's show, we're going to be premiering our brand new Did You Know series, and our first one focuses on the budget, so it'll tie in nicely to what we're discussing today. So make sure to stick around for that. So just to begin, Darren, we have a very unique way in which we handle the budget here, which is the budgeting for outcomes process, which is something a little bit different from how other cities handle their budget. So just to begin, could you kind of give us a bit of an overview on that and why you think it works so well for Fort Collins?
Yeah, well, let me begin by saying it's not a perfect tool. It's a tool that works very, very well for us, and there are other cities, many, many cities across the country that use different budgeting mechanisms. We were a very early adopter of the budgeting for outcomes process, and so Lawrence, you'll hear Lawrence throughout the next half hour or so. He'll tell war stories about that, and Lawrence also, just since we have you here, I want to say you've done a remarkable job helping equip other cities around the country, medium-sized, smaller cities, helping really tell our story and helping other cities get better. So I want to make sure I don't forget to say that. I'm so grateful that you're on our team and you're leading the effort that you're leading. And of course, Mike, as our Chief Financial Officer, has been fantastic. So I think that budgeting for outcomes really, when we made the change many years ago, we were really out on the cutting edge. A handful of cities and counties were utilizing this process. Again, it's one process that has worked very, very well in Fort Collins, works very well in many other cities, in 2015. But those early days were really hard. I think that what we realized was the tool that we were using at the time just didn't work. We had structural changes in our revenue flow. There was regional competition. There was, our costs were going to exceed our revenues, and on and on and on. And so we needed a smarter tool. And I always like to say we sort of went away from what we call trust us local government to a data-driven, results-driven local government. And that is, these days of give government your fees, taxes, fines, and charges, and then trust them they'll operate an efficient, reliable local government. I think those days are over. And I think that's good for local government, and it's served the city of Fort Collins really, really well. So I think that, and what you're going to hear over the next, like I said, next half hour or so, I think you're going to hear that we're much, much more in tune with the needs and desires and wants of the community. I think you're going to hear the story of the city of Fort Collins in a transformational journey and going from this trust us local government to a really results-driven local government and a focus on efficiency and continuous improvement. So when we started this, and I'll finish with this, David, when we started this journey, we thought we were moving to a new budgeting process when in reality it was transformational change. It has led to, over the last decade or so, a significant change in how we deliver local services. So that is the opening. I'm looking forward to you guys sharing your...
Yeah, if I can tag on to that. I mean, to me, because I come out of corporate and we did budgeting kind of the traditional way. To me, the real benefits of the budget for outcomes approach is one, it's very transparent. It takes our budget and it breaks it down into little pieces that all can be examined and evaluated individually. Two, it involves citizens, both in the middle of the process, and we put citizens on what we call our BFO, our Budget for Outcome teams, who are evaluating these proposals. And at the end of the process, there's a series of work sessions that are also very transparent where we're getting citizen input. So that citizen engagement is really critical. I think the third piece is the staff involvement in the budget process. Rather than just 8-10 people in a room for a couple of weeks putting the budget together, we have 7 BFO teams that have 5 to 6 staff on each one. Staff are also developing the budget proposals. So it socializes the priorities of the organization, and it socializes the decision process to decide what to fund. So, I mean, those to me are three of the really key benefits of what Budget for Outcomes does for the city.
Well, Mike, and what you made me think about is if you're a citizen, one of 155,000 people that live in Fort Collins, and you don't have a lot of time to pay attention to the, how the city distributes close to $1 billion over a 2-year period. One thing that I can say is that the city council's level of involvement is very different than the old days where we did the traditional methods. And so because this is a show where we're talking to our citizenry about our 15-16 budget, I think that citizens are very well represented by their elected representative, by their elected officials, by our city council and mayor, in really understanding what's in the budget, really influencing that, and having citizens engaged from throughout. So there's a much greater engagement level of our community. And then also, I mean, I will say that I think that in the time that I've been in the city of Fort Collins, Budgeting for Outcomes has really encouraged a different level of participation on the part of the elected officials. And as I look back, I can't imagine going back to that old methodology versus what we are now, and having the voice of our citizens in this budget process. It's been dramatic in terms of the change, and I think that's great for our 155,000 citizens.
Definitely. That's some fantastic context, and it really is a very informative and collaborative process. With that in mind, let's get into some of the specifics with the new budget, the 2015-2016 budget. Lawrence and Mike, could you speak a little bit to the amount of the new budget and some of the specifics with the new budget that we just put into place?
Let me, if I may, I'll talk at a high level, and then I'll let Lawrence kind of fill in some of the details.
Definitely.
Our budget in aggregate for 15 is about $555 million. It's a 2-year budget process, so we're really dealing with over $1 billion of budget in the process, but it's a little over $500 million each year. Because of the way we count funds in the government sector, the 550 includes double counts. And as an example of that, when we move money into the general fund and then we move it into parks and then we spend it in parks, we count that movement twice. So that 550 is not reflective of true green dollar spending, I call it. If you back that out, we're about $440 million. So we're still right close to $1 billion for the 2 years, even without what we call the double counts. Of that $550 million, the majority of that is operations and maintenance expense. There's about $45 million of capital in that. That goes to about, I think, $35 million in 2016. There's about $20 million a year of debt service inside of that. But the rest of that is all service costs for providing parks, recreation, open spaces. Our utilities are also included in there. So if you take that 550 and break out utilities, there are about 210 of that 550. So we have a light and power utility, a water utility, a stormwater, and a wastewater utility that is about 210 of that total 550. So the rest of that 240 is, again, parks, recreation, streets, engineering, planning, the city manager's office, finance, HR, IT, all of those kinds of things. So at a macro level, that kind of breaks out the pieces of our budget by function.
Definitely. Lawrence, can you get into some of the nuts and bolts, some of the details when it comes down to that?
As far as the numbers or the process?
The numbers.
So of the amounts that Mike just mentioned, there's about a total salaries of about $100 million and benefits of about another 30. So that makes up about 30% of our total budget. The next large piece is purchase power that flows through our electric utility, but we get from PRPA, or Platte River Power Authority. And so the combination of both of those is nearly 50% of the budget, with the rest going to the actual materials that we buy to, say, fix up roads or for the various services that we provide around the city.
Definitely.
And of that, from a financial piece, a large portion, as I mentioned, is people. In this budget, we have a net increase of 13.5 positions. because there are new positions that are added in the budget as well as positions that go away. For instance, like contracts that are not renewed. And so that net increase of 13.5 FTE or full-time equivalent brings a total full-time equivalent of positions in the city to about 1,340.
Okay. So everybody wants to know, how does this affect me? You know, the average citizen, they want to know how the budget affects them on a personal level. So could you guys speak a little bit to some of the what people will get this year in the budget, kind of on the ground, what they'll see?
Well, let me start just by saying that Fort Collins is a full-service city. Lawrence has kind of hit on this. So full-service city means that we not only provide sort of the general fund services, as Mike said, some of the internal services, but also parks and recreation and police. We have a relationship with the Poudre Fire Authority where we're a significant portion of their area of coverage. But I think, Mike, about half of our general fund budget goes to public safety, police and fire. Parks and recreation, transportation is a major, so the city provides transport bus service, as everyone knows. And then also, as Lawrence or Mike mentioned, the utilities, the light and power, the water, the wastewater, and stormwater. Many cities across the country don't provide that range of services. So, for example, California cities might be familiar with Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E. Well, the PG&E in Fort Collins is the City of Fort Collins Light and Power and Platte River Power Authority, which we're 1/4 owners in. So to start the conversation, Fort Collins is a full-service city. So how do parks and recreation touch the average citizen? Well, they do in a lot of different ways. You know, whether that's the senior center, whether that's Edora Pool and Ice Center, or Spring Canyon Park. So I think that, I oftentimes, as I'm sitting out in an outdoor patio, say in downtown at a restaurant, and I'm looking around and I'm counting the number of services that the city provides just in that one view shed. We're participating in the dialogue around clean air, around noise, and around policing, all those things. So I want to say that I think that the city of Fort Collins touches each of its citizens in so many different ways in a given hour. Mm-hmm. And so that full-service city is, it takes a lot to do that. And it takes resources to do that. And one of the things that I think differentiates Fort Collins from other communities is this community's really belief in itself and its desire to have high-quality services. So we talk about world-class municipal services as part of our vision statement, exceptional service for exceptional people. That plays into directly how ultimately the council chooses to allocate resources. So with that, Lawrence and Mike, maybe you want to share some more detail.
Well, something I would build on what you just said is when I was working in the private sector, but a resident in Fort Collins, I did not know how many services that the city provide. And so once I became an employee, and especially working in budget, and seeing all of the broad array of services that are provided, it was very eye-opening to me. And although probably reading a budget document is not the most exciting thing to do, online at fcgov.com/budget, not only do we have the 2015-16 budget in its entirety, with all the financials and the numbers, but you can also access the details of all the budget requests that were reviewed and either included in the budget or not. And those are all online. And so we break down our budget into 7 what we call outcomes. So transportation, safe community, economic health, et cetera. Within those 7 outcomes, all of our programs and services fall under those. And so if somebody has more of an interest in, say, safe community, they could go online and they could read just the budget requests that were in safe community and really get a better sense for all the services that the city provides our citizens.
Mm-hmm. And I'll jump on that if I may. It's a big document. It's like 430 pages long, memory serves me right. But if citizens would spend a little bit of time just with the first 55, 60 pages, there's some tremendous summary data there that shows by type of purchase we make, shows by head count, by function, shows our spending by functional group, how much does go to police, how much does go to fire, It talks about our revenue and where our revenue comes into play. It's got some front-end information about some of the macroeconomics that are driving our budget. So that first 55 or 60 pages of that budget, I think really would give citizens a tremendous overview of what's in our numbers.
Well, I think, Mike, also, if I may, I think it's important if you can just stress just slightly around the strategic plan and how that fits into the process, because that's something that my next door neighbor may not know.
Right.
That's a good point.
And let me take that a little broader, if I may. If you think about the BFO process, think of it in terms of 5 major steps. First step is strategic planning.
Okay.
And I'll come back and talk about each one of these at a really high level in just a second. First step is the strategic plan that Darren's talking about. Second step is crafting budget proposals. We call them offers that meet the objectives of the strategic plan. The third step is these budget for outcome teams that are comprised of citizens and staff evaluating how those offers meet the objectives of the strategic plan. The fourth step is Darren's executive team spending 40 hours during the month of July also evaluating offers relative to the strategic plan. With the fifth step then, I believe October 31st we have to, or is it September? September 31st, we have to present the budget, the city manager's recommended budget to council. So the fifth step is council and citizens going through a series of work sessions and doing that. So going back to the beginning, the strategic plan is the basis for the budget. That's where, based on citizen input, based on council input, and based on staff input of the issues and priorities of the city, under the 7 outcome areas that Lawrence talked about, we develop a series of strategic objectives, which are things we think are important to accomplish or resolve or focus on over the next 5 years. And that becomes the foundation that then staff uses to develop proposals to go accomplish those objectives. And that strategic plan is then used through that entire process to evaluate what are the proposals we'll fund based on what best meet and fit the achievement of those strategic objectives.
I think what's important throughout every step of that process is civic engagement, our citizen engagement, and the city council's role. And not to mention, we haven't talked about boards and commissions. Boards and commissions who are full of citizen volunteers have a play in those processes as well. And I think that's when, David, that's when at the end of all of those, months and months of work and hundreds and thousands of hours, again, it's a big budget, but that's when council adopts that budget at the end of the year, the beginning of a 2-year period, that's really that's the community's budget, and it's a significant process. But I would just encourage people who are watching, if any of that interests you, there's an opportunity to play in any one of those steps, and I just think that's so important. I've seen in other communities where budget development really, at the time when the council's adopting those budgets, there's no one in the audience. And what I love about Fort Collins is that this stuff does matter to this community.
Yes.
But the more that we can do to encourage our citizens to be engaged, we're going to have a better process and we're going to have a better budget that reflects what they'd like to see. And again, I'll just, the work that the staff teams do, Lawrence and Mike and others, is phenomenal. The work that the BFO teams with our citizens on those teams and staff, boards and commissions, citizens, and the councils. I mean, the council spends hundreds of hours on this issue as well. So by the time we have this adopted budget, it truly is the community's budget.
And can I piggyback on that just a little bit, because I was struggling to remember the dates as I was talking earlier, so maybe to clarify that and to clarify when citizens can get engaged. We give the budget to the council by September 1st, I believe.
That's right. It's the
first
first,
Monday.
first meeting.
By the first Monday of September. Council has to adopt the budget by the end of November. So along the way, where citizens really get involved is in the May, June, July timeframe, really May and June. Our communications group is out asking for input on the various offers and proposals. You're heavily involved in that, and that's an opportunity for citizens early in the process to see what's being proposed and provide their thoughts and their input about the priorities of the various funding alternatives. And then as well, starting in that first Monday of September, there's a series of 3 work sessions where, and a series of 3 budget hearings and budget open houses where citizens can come to council on Tuesday night and have 2 to 3 to 4 minutes at the microphone talking to council about what their priorities are. So there's lots of opportunities for citizens to engage in this process.
And if I could add one last piece to that, a really critical component of our budgeting for outcomes process is that we have 2 citizens on each of our BFO teams. That's 14 citizens who are actively engaged in helping to provide thoughts on what should be funded or not funded. And each of those individuals is basically volunteering 30 to 40 hours of their time in helping the city craft its budget. And there's very few cities around the country that have that type of citizen involvement.
That's a huge commitment, definitely. So for anybody who is interested, first off, go to fcgov.com/budget. Take a look at the 15-16 budget, check it out. Like Mike said, read through the first few pages, and you can definitely learn quite a bit there. And then second off, for anybody who is interested in getting involved, be it a BFO team or some of our outreach, coming to council, when will our next opportunity be for our budgeting process? When will we start that, and when can they keep an eye out to get involved in that?
So really the next, this year we'll start our strategic planning process for that. So in the fall time frame, there'll be information, and we'll be going out to the community saying, for the next 5 years, what are the things that the city of Fort Collins should be focusing on?
Definitely. So if you are interested, check it out this fall. Keep an eye open, and definitely give us your input, because as they said, the more input we get from you, the better our budget turns out. So, well, is there anything anybody would like to add before we end today? I appreciate y'all's time.
I guess for me, I would say, you know, this, as I talked when I started, I talked about the transformational nature of our local government here in Fort Collins, and it's just been remarkable. It's not been a sprint; it's been a journey, and the point that I wanted to finish with is, we're not done yet. This is about continuous improvement. How do we take what we're doing and continually get better?
Definitely.
And I think it is something that I know that the city councils that I've worked with over many years continue to push the city organization and drive. I know the community pushes and drives the council, and I can tell you, and I know I can speak for you, David, and you, Lawrence, and Mike, that's what makes our jobs, that's what gives us goosebumps about our jobs. We're working in a place that a community expects that. And when you go from a community that expects it to a community that we think deserves it, it just is, it's a great place. So, you know, I think this is everything we've talked about today. Budget is the topic, but we've talked about partnerships and continuous improvement. And so we're going to keep getting better. And the system that we have now, the budget that we have, it's not perfect. As Mike said, it's 400 plus pages. There's going to be errors, but one thing I can guarantee, if there's you know, change in direction or wanting to fix errors, we do that. We're deeply committed to it. So
Definitely.
Thanks for the topic. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, certainly. Very important one that impacts all of our citizens. So thank you, gentlemen, for your time today. I appreciate it very much. And now, the world premiere of our first ever Did You Know series video. Check it out.
Welcome to Did You Know, a new series of videos that will help answer your questions about the city of Fort Collins. Today's Did You Know question is, where does the money from the city's budget come from, and where does it go? As a full-service city, we have lots of funding sources and many things we have to pay for to provide the outstanding municipal services our community is accustomed to seeing. Rather than tell you how intricate it is, we are going to break down the basics using an example we can all relate to: pizza. Like a pizza, the city starts with a solid funding foundation, aka the dough. There are 3 main categories from which the city gets its money: taxes, fees, and grants, or leverage dollars. Taxes include sales and use taxes. Everyone contributes to sales tax when they make a purchase in Fort Collins. In addition to sales tax, we have dedicated taxes. Voters support these taxes to achieve community desires. Examples include open space, Keep Fort Collins Great, the street maintenance program, and our capital improvements program. Sales and use taxes fluctuate based on the economy, while property tax sees slight variations based on current property values. Fees are another large source of revenue. This is our sauce and cheese, both very important ingredients to any good pizza. Fees include user fees, impact fees, and utility fees. User fees are things like paying for recreation programs, attending a show at the Lincoln Center, or playing a round of golf on the city-owned course. Impact fees are fees paid by developers that go towards things like new parks and new infrastructure. Utility fees are a big part of this. As a city-owned utility, these fees are provided by all water and electric customers. We are always leveraging our dollars with grants and state or federal funds, and other small revenue sources like interest income. These often change from year to year, but we are always working hard to maximize these resources. These little things are like extra toppings on our wonderful pizza. This pizza looks ready to bake. The baking process, like the budget process, takes time. Baking happens every 2 years through our budgeting for outcomes process. The city has to have a balanced budget, and City Council typically approves the biennial budget in November of even-numbered years, 2014, 2016, and so on. Now we have this completed pizza, or budget process, and we can divvy it up. A large portion of this delicious pizza is already spoken for. In fact, 78% has already been set aside. This portion includes utilities, dedicated taxes, and reserves. The remaining 22% of pie represents everything that is funded out of our general fund. A fair portion of this will go towards parks, park maintenance, police, transportation, and internal services such as IT, communications, and operations. Well, there you have it. That's where the money comes from, and that's where it goes. The city is always trying to create the best pizza possible with the ingredients available to better serve you, our community. Now you know.